Hello folks, my name is Marco Landry and today I'm going to be installing the Motion Pro Rev 2 throttle kit on my Yamaha R3. So this whole process was a bit cumbersome, to be honest with you, because I was hoping to purchase the Rev 3 throttle kit, but when I was looking at the different websites and even at the Motion Pro website, they had phased out or reduced production for the Rev 2 kit, and they were ramping up on the Rev 3 kit, and it was not available for the R3. Since I couldn't find anything as a kit, I decided I was going to purchase everything separately from hopefully one vendor, but it turned out that I had to purchase from 3 different vendors to get all the parts together to form that kit. So I started with the various cams here. I already had the cams, and I'll talk about the cams in a minute, but I had the cams from my previous installation on different bikes, so it comes with an extra set of cams for each kit. So I have a bunch of these cams. So that was my starting point, and then I found the throttle tube housing. So that was part number 1 from vendor number 1. And then from vendor number 2, I found the grips and also the throttle tube that will fit into that throttle housing. And then from vendor 3, I finally found the throttle cables that will fit on that bike and will work with these components. So that was my adventure to purchase all of this. As of this morning, when I look on the Motion Pro website and when I look on the various vendors in Canada and the US, you are now able to purchase the Rev 3 kit. They are in stock and available to ship from the most popular vendors out there. So you should not have to buy all these different components one by one from different vendors. So that's for the purchasing process. I would strongly recommend that if you can, go with the Rev 3 kit, unless you're able to find a Rev 2 kit somewhere that's inexpensive. Having said that, if you found a Rev 2 kit, there's a Rev 2 and a Rev 2.1. The only difference between the two is the fact that the throttle tube for the Rev 2.1 is more durable and has a different thickness, so it will not fit with all the components of the Rev 2 kit. So you have to be very careful if you're mixing and matching different kits. So that's my warning number 1 for that. So the second thing I want to mention is that on your OEM setup, you have the throttle housing that is integrated with your kill switch or your on-off switch. So when you upgrade your bike to the Motion Pro Rev 2 or Rev 3 throttle kit, you will also need to purchase an extra aftermarket kill switch or on-off switch, because again, the OEM has everything bundled into one unit. So that's why you need to buy this additional switch. When you purchase this from Motion Pro, you have the option to purchase the generic on-off switch, or you can also purchase the one that is specific to your bike that will come pre-wired and you just plug and play into your existing wiring harness. So that makes the process a bit easier. And if you're not comfortable with doing the wiring, I would strongly recommend that you go with the plug and play option because it's a lot easier. In my case, that switch was already installed. I already installed it a while back when I was doing some other work, because I also have the keyless option on my bike from Woodcraft. So when I was doing the keyless installation, I also upgraded or changed the kill switch to have a standalone kill switch. Before I start the installation process, I wanted to orient you a bit on what's been done so far on this bike. So you can see this Motion Pro kill switch has already been installed previously on the bike. And what I was talking about earlier is that you have the option, when you purchase this from Motion Pro, to actually buy the switch that comes with the connector. If I can unplug it here. So this is the switch or the connector for that switch. And this kit here for the R3 can come exactly like this with the piggy tail and connector, so you don't have to do anything else. You can simply come in and plug it in. So if you're not comfortable doing any wiring and identifying wires, I would strongly recommend that's probably the best option. If you feel comfortable doing wiring, then you can go ahead and purchase the generic unit and do the wiring yourself. Not a big deal, not super complex, but you have to make sure that you're comfortable doing so. So that's for the kill switch. In my case here, you can see I no longer have a key, so my system is keyless, and I'm using the Woodcraft keyless adapter to bypass everything and make sure I don't need a key. So that's why I shaved this key ring here where the key is normally installed, and it's nicer look, cleaner look, lighter, so on and so forth. So this is definitely an option for the racetrack and not the road, obviously. So this is some of the setup. In my case as well, I have the Woodcraft clip-ons, and I also have the Brembo RCS 15 Master, and I also have the caliper there. So in terms of fitting everything, it might be slightly different, because when you have the OEM set up, it's slightly bigger, right? You have all this equipment on the handlebar, it takes a bit more room. That's why I prefer this option, because it fits a bit nicer, you have a bit more room, and well, you got better braking power as well, obviously. So this is totally up to you. A lot of people would say that you don't really need a lot of braking power on the R3, and I tend to agree with you, but I like gadgets and I like nice components, and that's why I went with this Brembo brake or front brake system. We are now ready to start the installation process. So this is the progressive cam that I was talking about earlier. This is the RR cam, or the orange cam, and the cam only fits one way on the throttle tube, and if you have to force it, then you're going the wrong way. So this is how it assembles on the throttle tube. So nice and clean. And again, you don't want to force it. It should just slide in and clip in place. Before I install the throttle tube on the clip-on here, I want to make sure that there's going to be enough room so that everything's going to fit properly. And the throttle tube fits in properly. I'm also going to disassemble the throttle housing, and in order to do so, you need a 4mm internal X, and you can undo these two bolts here. And once this is done, we're just going to simply fit this on top of the throttle tube and the cam. So luckily I got a few different angles for the video here, so hopefully this other angle will work properly and you guys will see this properly here. So what you want to do here is make sure that this is going to fit properly and there's going to be enough room. So if I simply put this like this, and the cables will be coming out at the top here. So I'll need to figure out what's the best approach. Am I going to route it on top or underneath the bracket for the brake fluid here? And I think it's probably going to be on top. If I remember correctly what I did on my other bike, you'll have the wires or the cables, the throttle cables coming this way and going under the top triple. So it looks like there is enough room. You want to make sure there's a little gap at the end here as well of your clip-on, because I'm going to have my lever guard here. So you want to make sure that you take this into consideration as well if you have a lever guard. The brake lever should go in without touching your throttle housing, and that seems to be okay here. I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to squeeze everything a bit tighter together. I'll leave the throttle housing here. I'm going to move my switch a bit closer to the housing, and then I'll bring the brake lever in a bit more as well. Okay, so now the next step is to remove the OEM throttle cables here. So I left them there because I wanted to easily remember the routing or where these cables were routed on the bike. So in this case here, they are routed in front, and then they go to the side bracket and then connect to the throttle assembly. So just to give you a different perspective here, so it looks like this, where you have the cables that would typically be connected here. You have the two cables, you have your pull and your push cable, and they are routed on the side here, all the way underneath in front of that, or inside of the left fork. And then there's a little clip here that retains everything in place, so you have to undo this clip, and then if you keep going, you can see here that it will terminate. It will terminate right here on that plate. And that plate here it's a two-piece plate, so you can unscrew the two screws here. So I'll just point this out here. So you can unscrew these two Phillips screws. But in my case, because the tank is not here, I will only unscrew the two bolts at the top plate here. And the reason why you need to remove this is because these elbows here, these metal elbows, are soldered to or welded to that top plate. And as part of the kit with Motion Pro, you have a replacement bracket. So in order to remove this, you simply need to have an internal 4mm X, and you can undo those two bolts here. And once we undo this, we will be able to remove the OEM cable, and you will need to keep these bolts here. The two bolts that you're removing will need to be preserved or kept, because that's how you will reattach the Motion Pro bracket. All right, and this is what it looks like when it's fully removed. So this is what I was talking about earlier. This plate here is welded to these two elbows, so there's no way to disconnect it. So that's why we will replace this with the bracket from Motion Pro. Okay folks, before we install the cables here, or the throttle cables I should say, you need to lube them. They are not lube out of factory, so the first step that you do when you get them normally is that you want to lube them. I'm using the Motion Pro lube here, the cable lube, and you have a few options to lube these. So in the past I used to try to insert that little straw in that hole and push the liquid and play with the cable, the pull cable, until it was fully wet from end to end. That's always a bit challenging. I then got one of these Motion Pro luber here, and this one is okay. If the cable is straight, what happens normally is that you would just pinch the outer cable with the two thumb screws here, and you capture that cable on the side there, and then you insert your little straw for the lube and you spray it in there, and it's going to force it down the cable. The problem with this, I found, that with these type of connectors here where it's angled, and the fact that it's not the outer or this type of material here, it's not the sheeting of the cable, it's always a bit difficult to grab on this part. So it would go like this normally. I find that it's always leaking. It's never working that great. So what I've been doing recently is that I purchased the new Motion Pro cable luber. So this is the version 3, I believe. It works a bit better. It creates a better seal, and I've always find I'm getting more success, especially when the edge or the finished part or the exposed part here is a threaded portion like this one here. So I find that this one works a bit better. So what I do normally, and this is me, you can do whatever works for you, is that I will disconnect the inline adjusters. So I will simply unscrew these two inline adjusters here, and this is now undone. And what I want to do is put my cable luber at one end, And the cable luber, it's not super complex, but what you want to do is take, once you undo the two parts, you want to take the bottom part here, or this, I'm going to call it the bottom part and the upper part, if you will. And I just simply insert it on top of the cable. And then you have this little grommet here. And this little grommet can be undone. And you will just simply wrap this around the cable here. That's going to create the seal. So let me show you what it looks like here. So this is what it looks like. You have this grommet here that is inserted there, and then you pull your bottom part up. And then what I do is that I simply take the top part and I put this in here and screw everything up, or screw everything in, not screw everything up. And normally what you want as well is that there's a plunger here, and the plunger needs to be pushed back out a bit. And because I've used this a few times, it's a bit slippery, so that's why I use a tool to push it in there. But normally what you want to do is make sure that this is seated properly on the cable or the threads, and you will simply screw everything in place here. And you don't have to go super tight, you just need to go tight enough so that there's a nice seal and the lube will stay in the bottom container as opposed to leaking all over the place here. So now you can see it's super solid. It holds everything in place. And there's a small hole at the top here. So what I want to do is insert that tip here inside of that little rubber seal. And when it's done, now I'm able to spray. And when you spray, you should hear the liquid go through, and it should come out at the ear end. So let's see if that's going to work. So I'm spraying now, and you can hear it. And now the lube is coming at the ear end. And just do this a few times so that makes sure that there's enough lube. And now we're good for this one. I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other cable. For the top part here, because obviously the top part hasn't been lubricated, so what I do normally is, because the opening here is a bit wider, I simply take my straw, or that little red thing here, and I spray some liquid in it, or some lube in it, and you can see that it's quickly coming out on the other side here. So I'll do the two of them at the same time here. So it's a bit of a messy job. You'll have to wipe everything after. But let me tell you, it's worth the messiness, because the cables glide so much better after that. And in the long run, it will also prevent or reduce the amount of corrosion. So I normally do this at the start of season on all my bikes, and I always find it makes such a nice difference, and it only takes a minute or two to do so, right? So it's a super simple process and super beneficial in my opinion. I'm going to repeat the same process on the other cable, and then we'll start with the assembly process. So one thing I did not mention as well is that once you're done spraying or inserting the cable lube, this is a plunger here, so you simply press on this and it will push all the extra liquid that's left in that bottom cap out at the ear end. So you push it and it will drain everything properly, and then you can undo your top cap. So what I do as well, the other thing I should have mentioned is that normally I'll just slide or glide the outer case up and down a few times to make sure that everything is properly lubed. And then when you reassemble all of this, you want to make sure again that you're not touching any dirt with it, because the dirt will definitely stick to this after. So before I start the installation process, I just wanted to show you that this is the plate that comes with the cables. And basically you're going to reuse the two screws or the two bolts that you took off earlier. So your two bolts will go there, and your two cables, the pull and the push cable, will go in those two holes. Before we install everything, what I do normally is that I will undo one of these nuts here, because you'll want to squeeze these two nuts on top of that bracket. So I'll undo the first nut, and then we'll undo the second nut as well, and we'll just leave it, and it won't fall down because the barrel will keep it in place there. So after loosening up these nuts and removing the nuts here, you also want to determine which side is the pull and which side is the push cable. So this will connect here. These two cables will connect to your cam, and when you turn the throttle, one cable will pull, and after that, when you release, it will go back to normal. So what you want to do is identify which one is the pull, and in this case, when it goes like this, everything is clipped together, your throttle will be like this. So when you turn the throttle on, or when you open the throttle, the pull one will be the one towards you here. So make sure that you're aligned properly, or if you're not clear, just put it on the bike and you'll see here that this part, so if the cable is straight like this, this is towards my handlebars here, towards the front of the bike. So the cable towards you is the pull cable here. So if I move this, I can see it at the end which one's moving. This is the one that was moving here. So just to make sure again that you can see it, you can see that when I move one, the other one is moving here. Possibly a bit difficult to see on camera, but just want to make sure that this is clear for everyone. So that means now that when I look at this, the protecting case here for the cable has some white layers on it. So I know now that this is my push side, and the pull side doesn't have any letters or any writing on it. So that's fairly easy to identify. So what you want is to have the pull cable on the back side of the cam to open the throttle body. I'm going to show this to you in a minute here. That's going to make a bit more sense. So this is the cam here that will control the throttle bodies based on your wrist twisting or your throttle twisting. So you twist the throttle and this cam here is going to move. And when that cam is moving, it will open the carbs or your throttle body. So in this case, when I move this, you can see that if it only goes one way, by the way. So when I do like this, that would be a pull motion. So the cable will be routed in the back here, and there's going to be one in the front. So your pull cable needs to go in the back here, and your push cable will go in the front, so that when you twist the throttle again, it will move in the right direction. So you can see here that I have my pull and my push cables, like I mentioned earlier. So this is the pull cable. So this is the one that will go towards the back of the bike. So I'm simply gonna insert these wires like so here into these grooves, and I'm gonna attach everything in place now, and then I'll route the cables after that. So that's what it's gonna look like here. So I'm gonna secure that nut in place. I'm not gonna go super tight, and normally when I start, I just go all the way to the top so that I have enough slack to do all the adjustments. And when I mean all the way to the top, I mean that this bolt will be screwed all the way in on the elbow, and same thing for the front one. And you simply thread this in place here. Again, don't need to go super tight just right now. I just want to fit everything properly, and after that we'll readjust everything accordingly. I'm gonna route this at the right location like it was before. So now we're gonna put this on top of the bracket, and I'm gonna use the same two bolts that I had earlier, and I'm gonna reconnect the Motion Pro plate on top of the OEM plate. So these are the two bolts here that I've just secured in place. So this is what will attach the Motion Pro bracket onto the OEM bracket. So now we can attach the cam or the barrel on the cams. So you can see that I've routed it in the back right here. So the cable will route on the back, and you will simply insert the barrel into this area right here and make sure it stays in that groove. You have the first one here. Not easy to do it with one hand, but you can see my barrel's inserted and the cable has been routed on the back, and we'll do the same thing for the front or the push cable. So we can see now I have that barrel here, so we'll do the same thing. Insert the barrel inside that little hole here and make sure it's fully inserted, and then we will route it towards the front of that cam. And there's going to be some excess here in your wire, so you just want to make sure that you either pull it from the other end. So you can see that when I pull on that cable, it will straighten up. So now everything is properly inserted. So now we have everything connected on the throttle body side. So now what I want to do is make sure that my cables are properly routed, first of all, and secondly, I want to now connect all of this on the ring here, or that cam. So that's going to go like this. And as I mentioned earlier, now we're going to connect everything on that throttle ring or that cam. But before I do so, I want to apply just a little bit of grease on that ring. So what you can do is just take a bit of grease and push it in that groove here on your ring, and then you can take a screwdriver or something that will allow you to push this inside. And same thing, I'm going to apply some grease where the barrel goes as well, and you can be generous and just wipe the excess after that. You could also do this before you start the installation process, but it gets a bit slippery and messy after that, so I'd rather do it like so. And that should be good enough here. Once this is done, I simply take my screwdriver and just spread it evenly inside here, so that when that cable is wrapped around there, there's going to be a bit of grease inside, again to prevent corrosion, and if there's any junk in there that accumulates over time, the grease will help out a little bit with making sure there's a nice and fluid motion there. Alright, so we're gonna wipe the excess here, and now we are ready to start wrapping these cables. So I'm going to reconnect everything properly here. So this is just a little clip here. So now I got my two cables connected, and so I know for a fact that this is my pull cable now. So I'm going to twist the throttle a little bit, and I'm going to insert the barrel into the ring. I'm going to twist this around a little bit, and I'll also insert my push cable in. and everything is slippery with the grease and the lube. So just be patient. This is a bit more challenging than I thought it would be here, and always seems to be worse when I try to do this on camera in front of an audience, obviously. So here we go. So that looks good now. So this is what it should look like on yours as well when you do so. And we will just take the housing and reconnect everything and do a bit of testing. So you'll take your two halves here, two halves, not even sure how to say this in English properly, but the two different part of the housing here, and you'll reconnect everything on top of the cam and the end of the throttle tube. And I'm gonna put this at the right location. You want to make sure there's a little gap at the end here. Again, as I mentioned earlier, when you have your throttle tube, especially if you have a lever guard, you want to make sure that there's a small gap at the end so it doesn't go straight at the end or right to the edge. And then we'll insert these two bolts and we'll start threading them in place. And then we can do some fine tuning to make sure that everything is working properly, everything fits properly. All right, so once you've finalized assembling the housing here, you can simply slide that little protective boot here on top of the housing, and that will just prevent the dust and the water and the junk from getting inside here. So slide this on top of that housing, and there's so much lube on it that it's easy to slide in here. And I'm just gonna wipe the extra lube. Okay, so what you want to do once you've installed this is that you want to make sure that when you take your throttle and you open it fully and you release it, it snaps back in place. So you want to have this clicking sound that you can hear, like so. And on the other side here, you can see that everything is working properly. There's a bit of slack in the return. There's a bit of slack in the pull cable as well. So they're not super tight. And you will adjust this with the two adjuster screws or nuts here. You can change the height, so you can raise it up or down depending on how much pressure, or if you don't have enough snapback, you can adjust these two elbows here, raise them or lower them according to the response in your throttle. And if that doesn't work, or if that works and you need to do some micro adjustment after that, you can simply adjust the inline adjusters. And after that, make sure that you back up the nut or the security nut to make sure that nothing moves once you're riding. So everything is secure here, everything has been adjusted properly, and it's snapping back in place. The next step will be the grips, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm gonna open this up here. So you'll have two different diameters of grip. One will be for the throttle side. Obviously the bigger one will be for the throttle side. You have the little Motion Pro logo here. So I'm gonna try to line this up towards the back of the bike on both sides. So I'll put this here temporarily, I should say. And I'm gonna use a little bit of compressed air to help me push this grip on the throttle tube. I'm gonna line this up properly here, and then we'll start blowing a bit of air to push this in. I just want to align it a little bit here. It shouldn't be too bad to slide on, but it's always a bit easier with some air. So now we're going to do the second side. Make sure that the Motion Pro logo is inside or towards the rider. So I'll safety wire the grip in 3 different spots at both extremity and in the middle as well. And normally what I do is like I wrap it around twice, and that's normally good enough. It's not like you need a lot of safety wire for something like this here, but I like it when it looks nice as well and it's solid. Alright, so once this is done, I'm gonna cut this and leave just a small piggy tail, and then we'll push the piggy tail in the grip itself so that you don't get caught with your gloves or your skin into this little piece that will be sticking up. What you can do is just take the tip of the pliers and push this little piggy tail into the rubber of that grip, and then you can push it a bit further with a screwdriver if it's not far enough for you. Alright, so now everything is working okay here. The throttle is twisting okay, nothing is getting caught. Alright folks, the process or the installation process is done. What you want to do as a final check or final step is to move your clip-ons, your handlebars from side to side or from lock to lock, and test and make sure that the return of your throttle still works properly. In my case, I don't have the gas tank. Normally I would do this with the gas tank on, the bike would be running, and I would listen for the RPM changes. If the cable was being pulled somewhere, you would notice this way as well. But it's a valid test to do lock to lock, and also to make sure that your throttle returns at the proper position when you drop it. So you should hear that clicking sound when you hit at the top and at the bottom of the cam on the throttle bodies. So it's working fine here, the cables are not being pulled, everything's routed properly, and there's a bit of slack here. I've resecured everything, so everything is working as it should. So hopefully that video was helpful. If it was, please do me a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, as usual, connect with me. And until next time, stay safe, ride safe, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.